They're learning how to purchase a plant, from how much moisture should be in it to how to do a security layout in their building. Then we have a scholarship also for the horticulture side where they're learning indoor and outdoor growing. They're getting the pH levels and the lighting scheme for setting up a grow. So they're doing all these great things and people are coming out and it's really helping a lot.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Different Leaf, the podcast. I'm Britt Smith, here today to be your cannabis career counselor. In case you've been blissfully living under a rock, it's July 2020. We're about 5 months into this pandemic, and more than 17 million Americans have lost their jobs. The worst hit industries have been leisure and hospitality, education and health services, and retail. And experts say up to 50% of all hotel jobs could be completely eliminated by the end of the pandemic. In June, Massachusetts actually had the highest unemployment rate of any state, with more than 17% unemployment. In short, the US needs to make jobs and revenue fast. Well, friends, we may have found a solution. Since we're all stuck at home and out of work and anxious, the legal cannabis industry has been booming. In May, Colorado hit a record one-month high with more than $192 million in cannabis sales. That's the biggest single-month tally since rec sales started in Colorado in 2014. They've already made about $170 million in taxes since January. Oregon also hit a new milestone in May with marijuana sales topping $100 million for the first time. And Illinois cannabis companies had their busiest month ever in June with nearly $50 million in sales and a notable increase in visitors from out of state. Now, it may feel like a long shot to dream about the federal government legalizing weed, but there is actually a push going on in Congress to legalize amid the pandemic. I'll give you some more details on that after today's interview. For now, we can see that in states with legal cannabusinesses, the job market is looking a little better. This episode, we're going to learn what it takes to get into legal weed, even if you have a record that you might think holds you back. Our guest this week is Angela White, the Equity for Industry Program Manager for Success Centers. For over 40 years, Success Centers has been working with marginalized community members in San Francisco, mostly people of color from low-income backgrounds aged between 16 and 24 who are trying to better their lives, get educated, and get to work. And over the past few years, the organization has started hearing that folks want to get into cannabis. And you'll hear Angela mention Liz. That's Liz Jackson-Simpson, the CEO of Success Centers. So, Miss Angela White, thank you so much for joining me. I want to ask you first, if you can just tell me a little bit about Success Centers, what it was when it started, because it's not a new organization, right?
No, Success Centers has been around for about 40 years, and it was started by Superior Court judges who wanted to work with youth coming out of the detention centers. And so since then, we have spread into a lot of different locations. We do construction, tech, the arts, hospitality, and now cannabis.
So what is it that got you guys into trying to connect new workers into the cannabis field?
Well, we knew it was a new budgeting industry. So Liz and I have been speaking about the cannabis space and trying to put together a curriculum for about a year. And one day she called me out of the blue and she goes, Angela, I need you. And I said, okay, what do you need? And she says, well, I need you to come work for me. I'm like, okay, well, when do you want me to come? And she says, yesterday. So
you're hired.
Yeah. And so I said, well, okay. I said, but I need to give my job a notice. And so she says, well, can you give them a short notice and come on board? And so I did. I quit my job. And 2 days later, I was at Success Centers.
Wow.
Yeah, because I just have a love for the plant and all of its healing properties and what it does for people. You know, I suffered, like I said, with ailments myself, so I really understood that. And so when we started out, this was about getting people hired into the industry. And Success Centers was doing what they called an employer spotlight. And I said, well, it's a little bit different in cannabis because we don't hire 100 people at a time. They're, smaller hires. So we need to do something different. So we created something called the Budding Industry Job Shop. where we bring in several employers at once with all their different positions, and they can come in and talk about what it's like to work a day at their company. And they're talking to the job seekers, and the job seekers are able to say, well, I wonder if this is a company where I want to work. And then they're able to ask the employers questions and vice versa. It's a little bit different, but it works very well for retention rates because we want people to stay at these positions and move up in the company.
Right. So what kind of positions do you find get offered a lot at these fairs?
Well, I don't like to call it a job fair because it's not really a job fair because of the interaction. That it's actually more like a TED Talk for employers, and to really express, what their needs are and what they're looking for, right? And I don't think you get to get that at jobs fairs, so that's why we do it a little bit different. So usually bud tenders, drivers. Right now, we have some positions in the tech space of cannabis, if you can say that. People have platforms that they need people, so we have a spot for engineers, and really we're focusing on women and Black people and people of color for these positions because that's the marginalized community that we work in. And so when I get calls like for upper management positions or positions where folks have to have a specific skill set, I'm really searching hard to find those folks.
Coming up after a super quick break, I talk more with Angela White about how the cannabis industry can become more equitable. Different Leaf, the podcast, is only 4 months old, and being so young, we could really use your help to reach more ears. Give us a boost by rating and reviewing the show on podchaser.com. That's podchaser.com. I really appreciate it, and so does the rest of the Different Leaf crew. Okay, that's it. Back to the show. So let's talk a little bit about the people that you're serving here and what it is that's standing in their way with getting into the cannabis industry as an employee. So what are some of the biggest barriers for folks that are trying to get into this industry right now?
Well, from my standpoint, I would think we lack a lot of courage in this industry. Our community has been hurt a lot through the war on drugs. And so our mission is to make sure for the equity program that our community has a foot in the door. And there's a stipulation for the compliance here that they have to have at least 35% equity community in their employ. So that's not the hard part. It's getting people ready for the above board market.
What about the financial barriers to getting in?
Well, there are financial barriers for some of the folks, but all of our programming, I will say, is free to job seekers and employers. But we have like a clothing closet here if they don't have clothes, so we're able to meet some of those barriers. So that's really not a real issue. I would say coming from the illicit market and the street names for products and things like that, I do a presentation on learning the lingo because the street name would be a joint in the dispensary. It's a pre-roll. The terpenes for us would be the smell and taste. We know that's how we purchase product for many, many years. And then the little hairs and the crystals on the plant would be the trichomes in this language, but that's what we call them, crystals and hairs. And that's how we know it's a good product, right?
Right. So that's so interesting. You got to teach them how to translate
this new industry and things that they're going to learn. And we've also been working on the technical side of getting bud tender training and customer service. We brought in a new partner, which is Eminent Consulting. They have a certificate program for bud tenders where they really get to know the science and we break down the different properties of cannabis to customers as they come in. So that was something that was really awesome.
This is a huge part of becoming a part of the legal cannabis industry, from taking it from the illicit market where you've not really known what you're buying. And like you said, there's so much lingo that goes with it. And like, what is indica and what is sativa? And there's so much that bud tenders have to know when somebody comes to them. It's like you're coming to a pharmacy. You have to be a very knowledgeable person. So I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't feel like they've got enough knowledge yet. and they don't realize that there's a lot of training that goes into changing into
Yes.
a legal industry. So
Yes.
what kind of education do you guys connect people with?
Okay, so Eminent Consulting, there's an online course that they're doing. We have a scholarship program on the job seeker side. And for folks that are interested in starting a business, which we also work with, who are equity applicants that have gone through the San Francisco Equity Program to be verified, we have a partnership with Oaksterdam University. I don't know if you're familiar with Oaksterdam, but
Yes.
most people in the cannabis space know Oaksterdam, right?
Oh, yeah. I know of Oaksterdam. Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm alumni from Amsterdam as well, but we have a scholarship program through them. And thanks to Dale Sky Jones over there, the chancellor, we are able to send our equity applicants to go to their cannabis business course. And it's in the virtual space. It used to be at the center, but since COVID, we've had to do a lot of adjusting everyone. They're learning how to purchase a plant, from how much moisture should be in it to how to do a security layout in their building. I mean, they're really covering everything. And then we have a scholarship also for the horticulture side where they're learning indoor and outdoor growing. They're getting the pH levels and the lighting scheme for setting up a grow. So they're doing all these great things and people are coming out and it's really helping a lot.
Oaksterdam is well known. I used to live out in the Bay Area. I went to UC Berkeley a couple years ago. Yeah, so actually the first place that I came to buy weed in that area was Harborside, maybe.
Harborside, yes, that's one of the older places.
That place blew me away. It was like so integrated. They had a massage area and like therapy and sort of whole body holistic healing stuff.
Mhm.
Then they also had places where you could go and buy the plants and you could then buy your products. And then there was like an Alcoholics Anonymous group. And it was just it's so different in California. So these are the kind of cultural differences that I've seen from the West Coast to the East Coast. Out here in Massachusetts, it's not really treated like it is in California. I mean, there is a focus on equity
Mhm.
in the policy. There's a focus on equity, but
Right.
when it really comes to trying to involve people of color in the industry, it doesn't really seem to play out. What are you seeing is going wrong here?
So this is the reason why we started the Equity for Industry program here at Success Centers. You have an equity program, and I'm hoping that as this adult use gets legalized or cannabis gets legalized throughout the states, that equity is not an afterthought. The equity community is not an afterthought. I think that's part of the problem that we're facing a little bit here. But the thing is, we need people to get this knowledge. We have equity for industry workshops here. Actually, last night we brought Meadow in. I don't know if you know who Meadow is, but they are the point of sale system that a lot of dispensaries use. They came in to do a presentation on teaching people, how to navigate their system. Things like this don't happen for our community unless people like us here at Success Centers provides that service. We also had Peak Extract out of Oregon came in and did an extraction presentation. Extraction 101 is what they called it. So we're getting top of the line education, and I think that is the key. One of the barriers I would say for San Francisco is, first of all, the Office of Cannabis is bottleneck, meaning they're moving very slowly.
Mm.
So if you did have a building, and that's another problem, it's hard to get locations here. But if they did have a building, it's taking up to sometimes 2 years to get through this process. Now, if you're an equity person, there's a wealth disparity in our community. And so who has, $5,000 to pay a month for 2 years? So those are the kind of things that need to be worked out beforehand. I think before you start trying to have equity program, making sure that those programs are funded, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that I've heard from a lot of people out here as well, is the lack of capital, the lack of access to funding. There's no banks that are going to be offering people loans. So you've really got to come with investors on board already. And oftentimes those investors are people that have come from other big industries and they've made their way up to the top of those industries. And let's be honest, most of the time, those are white men. So a lot of the time, the funding is coming from white men, even if it's funding equity applicants. The money behind them is from a different power source. So really, how do we get people of color involved in the generational wealth that can be built in the cannabis industry from here on out?
Well, I think that's why